This is Coach Jason Ballard, and I'm a business wingman. Over the years, I've learned a lot from working in our family construction business, serving as a senior officer in the United States Air Force, and running 12 different organizations around the world. Many people helped me get to where I am today, and it's my mission in life to serve as a personal wingman to others. That's what this podcast is all about, providing knowledge, tools, resources, and mentorship to help people soar to their highest altitude. Welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Ballard, and we're excited to be with you today. Got another really cool, different kind of show in store for you today, and a really phenomenal person on the show. Just a great leader, great person doing some amazing things. That I'm excited to really crack into some really good conversation. I think he's going to teach us a lot today. What are we talking about today? Today, we're talking about one of the top leadership challenges of today. We're talking about micromanagement and how to end it. How to end micromanagement. Man, well, how great would that be if we can eliminate that from our society today, right? But it's all about empowering people to be good decision makers. And so we have the privilege of having Chris Seifert on the show today. Let me tell you some really great things about Chris. He's the founder and CEO of an organization called Enabling Empowerment. It's a management consulting firm. They're focused on helping organizations with leadership, accountability, decision-making, and building a strong culture of the future. He has over 25 years of experience in manufacturing, working with Fortune 500 companies, and he was also a U.S. Navy submarine officer. We're going to kind of crack into that a little bit here too. But he's also an expert on this topic, and so much so that he actually literally wrote the book, and he's got a book out called Enabling Empowerment. You would definitely want to get a copy of that. It will open your eyes to a lot of different ways to think about the workforce today. So without further ado, Chris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're absolutely thrilled to have you on the show. Thank you for your time today. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about you. Help the audience understand a little bit about your background and, kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So you covered a lot there in the bio, but just to kind of recap, I spent 8 years on active duty in the Navy, in the submarine force. After I transitioned out of the Navy into manufacturing, starting with Georgia Pacific, was a plant manager for a couple different manufacturing plants for them. Managed another plant for Owens Corning. Then took a detour into consulting. I was a partner in a consulting firm for about 6 years, doing a lot of work around management systems and culture in high hazard industries like oil and gas, chemical, and those kinds of things. And then my last operational role, I was the vice president of operations for about a 6-year period with the largest biomass manufacturer in the world. And at that company, we started, when I joined, there were 4 plants and about 350 million in revenue, about 400 people. And 6 years later, we'd grown to 14 facilities, 1.3 billion in revenue, almost 1,500 employees. So dramatic growth, scaling that business over that time frame. And then, about a year ago, decided, hey, I'd kind of had enough, and it was time for me to step back. And throughout my career, there've been a couple of issues that I found every team that I went to work with was struggling with. First one being root cause analysis. The human brain is not really good at cause and effect thinking. It's better at correlation, and that's not good for problem solving, right? We need to get the cause and effect. But there are quite a few vendors I'd found over the years that were able to help me get my teams up to the levels I needed to on that. The other area that I've found folks struggle in is in decision making. Especially as we're promoting people, we're promoting them into roles where they have more responsibility for decisions. They're making bigger decisions with more risk, more complexity, more uncertainty. And first off, the human brain isn't very good at that to begin with. And we can talk a lot about that. I talk in my book, and in my practice. I spend a lot of time working with people to help them understand the decision traps that cause them to make bad decisions in the face of complexity and uncertainty. But the other issue is that we just don't teach people that skill set, especially, in the manufacturing environment where, most of my work has been, largely we have folks who are engineers and, or have some kind of operational training background, but then we're promoting them and asking them to make decisions that affect the business, but they've never been taught how to do that, right? They've never been taught how to think about, from an economic standpoint, which one of these decisions is going to make the business more money or less. They might be really great at, from a technical perspective, designing the machine, but it's that business thinking, business decision that they struggle with. So that was really why I, decided to write the book, Enabling Empowerment, because over the years have developed a decision making framework that have taught to my teams, and now I teach to clients that allows me to upskill their decision making ability quicker, so that I can then delegate more decisions to them. I can empower them to make more decisions for the business.
Wow, what a diverse background, just, from the Navy to the corporate sector to consulting to writing books and, teaching, coaching, mentoring people. That's quite the, I guess, circle of life, if you will, if you want to call it that. Um, Before we get too far into the meat of micromanagement and a lot of the things you just talked about, a lot of the things that are going on in the world, challenges, gaps, and stuff you're seeing, I have to ask, because a lot of people don't really understand the military. We're just coming out of Veterans Day, which everybody's celebrating all the service of and sacrifices of the service members like you. Um, what was it like to be on a submarine? That's kind of this, secret kind of world. Not a lot of people know much about it. You watch Red October or you 571 and you count, that's the movies, perspective. But what was it like being on there? Did you want to be on a submarine? Did you get assigned to that? And you're like, it's not really what I wanted, but I guess I'll do it. Or how did all that happen?
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of glossed over before I joined the Navy. So I graduated from college. I'd actually started a small restaurant cleaning company with 800. I had $800 in a vacuum cleaner, right when I graduated college, and so I started doing contract restaurant cleaning, and I grew that business to. I think I did 100,000 in the first year, and I was well on my way to doubling that in the second year. Which back in 98, that was a little more money than it is today, um but yeah, so after like this, 2 years of just working constantly at building this business, I came sitting at home late, at night and watching a special on PBS on submarines, and man, was just like, dude, that is so cool. And and you really look, you got a very small window in life when you can do that, right? You can't go back and do that when you're 40, right? You have to make that decision at that time. And so I said, I want to go do that. And I walked down, I told my partner the next day that I was selling him my half of the business and I was going to enlist in the Navy, and he thought I was nuts, and probably was nuts. And that started the journey. So but yeah, for what it's like, look, there's a lot of memes out there about, if you want to know what it's like being a submarine, just like take a chair and put it in your closet and close the door and turn the lights out and, sitting there for 3 months. Look, I mean, first off, it's incredible. I mean, the people you work with are some of the smartest, right, in the world. And the level of dedication that it takes, to do that is tremendous. And you don't realize, I mean, most people don't take for granted what the submarine force does, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it really is the foundation of our national security. The fact that, that you control a region of the world. In order to control any region in the world, you have to control the sea, right? Once you control the sea, you can shut down supply chains. You own, right? You eventually will choke off that part of the world. And if you want to control the sea, you got to control under the sea. Because if I, control from up the bottom, I can decide who gets to be in what supply chain. So it plays a pivotal role that most people, don't realize. But a lot of amazing. I'm going to tell you the most amazing thing I didn't anticipate going into it was, when you're out there, there's zero communication with the outside world. I mean, you're not getting the news, you're not getting, sports updates, you're not, you know, it's very little. If there's maybe a few trickle messages come in, but when you have 150 folks in a steel tube together for 3 months at a time, and there's no new news to talk about, you find interesting stuff to talk about and entertain yourself with, and you play a lot of cards. So
Man, that sounds phenomenal. What kind of places were you able to go? Are you able to talk about some of the general places you visited, like Pacific or Europe or?
yeah, I did a Western Pacific tour. We stopped in places. Guam is a submarine tender. They do a lot of maintenance on submarines in Guam. Saipan. I got to go to Singapore. We pulled into Japan. But a lot of the time you're on mission. I mean, I did a 72-day mission where you're just out at sea for 72 straight days doing the things that submarines do. But I will tell you. I mean, I was a join the Navy, see the world kind of person, and after our port tour in Singapore, I was like, man, that was a lot of fun. But the next time I want to go see the world, I think I'm just going to buy a plane ticket because I didn't necessarily want to be on mission for 72 days so I could go to Singapore for 4.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the people I've met in the Navy over the years, through my military service many years ago, say, yeah, it's a like certain types of people are really best suited for submarines. They're not suited for all people, So it's interesting how you saw the story on TV and it just kind of drew you in. Like what about the submarines did you like or drew you in? You're like, man, that sounds cool. That's definitely me. I want to do that.
Just the engineering challenge of what you're doing, right? I mean, it's incredible. And the thing that's most incredible is, especially when you think about from a nuclear reactor standpoint, right? Most people don't realize that the United States Navy has operated, more than 150 nuclear reactors for like 70 years now, right? And never had an accident, never had a nuclear accident. And not only are they operating that many reactors, they're doing it with an average crew age in its early 20s. They turn the whole crew over every 3 years, and they're not in a static situation. So most nuclear power plants on shore, they come up and they hit a certain power level and they stay at that level, right? Every time the submarine changes speed, it changes nuclear power, right, the level. So you're talking like this most incredible, complex, high risk environment on the planet, and they have the best safety record, right, of any organization. And how do they do that? And so that's what I mean. The biggest benefit I've gotten from working the Navy was being able to work in that environment and then take those lessons out to my work and since then in the civilian sectors. Just what are the things about their culture? How is it fundamentally different, right? It has to be when you're going to operate in an environment that complex. You can't just be in a command and control environment, right? You have to have every person fully engaged, thinking about what can go wrong, putting their hand up, saying, I think this is wrong. Something's going wrong. It doesn't matter how junior you are. It doesn't matter how senior the person you're talking to. You have to be able to do that. Very different from an infantry role, right? I mean, if you're giving somebody an order to run up a hill at a gun, you don't want them to think about it. You just need them to do it, right? And they don't need to think about what's going to happen. They just need to do what they've been told to do. You can't operate like that on a submarine, though, and so it takes a very different kind of culture to make it work.
Yeah, interesting dynamic with leadership there. Boy, that's fascinating. What is one of your most favorite, kind of memories from being on the submarine?
Um, man, I mean, we could take a lot of stories. Uh, I mean,
Loaded
just
question.
yeah. Look, just the drills. I mean, we did so many drills and evolutions. I mean, you constantly drilled, right? Like they were preparing for if there's a fire or if there's flooding casualties. And I mean, you would do them all day long. We actually called them Vulcan death marches because we would like just drill for days at a time out there. And just you certainly have a lot of fun in those situations when you're challenged, and you grow a lot, but you get to see a ton of stuff that you never would think you were going to see as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah, any scary moments, like get into some major storms or just, scary moments with other ships or subs that were coming and going and may or may not know you're there and
Yeah, I describe a submarine service as like days and weeks of boredom, followed by hours or a few minutes of terror, and then back to boredom for weeks, right? Where you have that, event. So some of those things, not a lot to talk about, but we certainly had. I mean, we had an uncontrolled depth excursion. It was actually my very last underway. We were doing a drill, and during the drill, we lost depth control on the submarine, which meaning that it started sinking, and we couldn't stop it from sinking. And the captain, we have of course had secured from the drill and all this. We're trying to fix it, and the captain had come on the one MC and said to the engineer, you know, hey, you have 10 feet, and then I'm gonna pull the we call it refer to it as a chicken switch. You pull the cord and it blows high pressure air into all the ballast tanks, and basically the submarine goes from really deep to on the surface in a few seconds and pops out of the water. And fortunately the engineer was able to do what he needed to do and prevent us from having to do that, because we knew there were ships up on the surface, and right, our concern was we were going to hit a ship when we did that. But we were starting to face the choice of we might hit a ship on the surface versus if we go any deeper, the submarine could crush itself, and that's a certain outcome, right? So, um, but yeah, that was my last underway. Like I said, the guy who was relieving me was sitting next to me that whole time, and I just was like, "I'm so glad you're taking this job for me because I'm done." So.
wow. Well, thanks for sharing those stories. I think just people don't understand what really goes into military service sometimes, and especially in submarines, certain areas where you can't talk about what you do. I spent most of my career in the Air Force in similar situations. I wasn't on a submarine, but I was in situations where, you just can't talk about all the things that you do. And people just don't really understand all that. I think that was, just amazing. But but if you really think about it, the leadership lessons you learned being in those kinds of environments where it's life, death, scary moments, things could go crazy and wrong, and everything's all on the line. Everybody's got to do their part, or there could be something that bad happens, and just the camaraderie there, that level of team and trust. I mean, what some powerful, powerful leadership lessons I bet you picked up through those experiences. Probably, probably haven't been able to mimic those since you've been in the civilian world, I would imagine, huh?
Well, no, actually, a big so with my previous consulting firm, a big part of the work that we did was we kind of distilled down the submarine culture into a few pillars that we said, hey, these are what really define the nuclear navy, the submarine forces culture, right? And those were integrity, formality, which means that we take what we do very seriously. We treat everything with a level of formality, because it's serious, right? We're not There's no horseplay. We're not screwing around here. We follow procedures, those kinds of things. Questioning attitude, meaning everybody has to be willing to question everything all the time. Level of knowledge, meaning you have to constantly be getting more knowledgeable about what you do. And in fact, it's not okay to do something if you don't know why you're doing it, right? You need to stop and find out why. And then the last one, in the Navy, we called it forceful watch team backup. In the civilian force, we usually call it just team backup or something like that. The forceful part doesn't go over. But that's that principle that I don't care what your rank is, if you see something wrong, you have to do something about it, to the point that you have to get forceful about it, right? Meaning, if you have to stand in front of somebody and get forceful saying this is wrong, then that's what you have to do. And so, I've been able to, we've been able to, I've been able to have a lot of organizations, you know, come up with specific interventions for how do we make our culture like that? How do we build questioning attitude into our culture? How do we build level of knowledge into our culture so that it's not okay for people to just do things because they're told, right? So, I mean, my own, as a leader myself, even in the civilian world, right? If I hear somebody say, if I said to an employee, "Why are you doing that way?" and they said, "Because so and so told me," I time out. That's not a reason why we do something. We don't do anything here because so and so told you. We do it for a reason. If we don't know that reason, let's stop and find out that reason, right? And so, even just little behavioral things like that, I think have they certainly helped me as a leader, and a lot of my clients benefited from as well.
I think that's so important in our workforce today. We've got kind of this whole transition of different generations exiting. We've got a new generation, or a couple generations, the Gen Zers and the millennials, taking over a preponderance of the workforce, and that whole dynamic there. Like, we're, as a nation, I think even as a global society, I mean, it's really challenging things in different ways. And especially with the younger generation, that concept of doing something because somebody told me to do, hey, take out the trash, hey, sweep the floor, and whatever that may be, and they don't know why they're doing it. They're just doing it because they were told to. Man, I think that is huge in today's world. And so I want to kind of follow up on that, Chris. Um, since you got out of the Navy, you've been in the civilian sector, you've traveled, you've consulted, you've worked in these, pretty big companies. What do you see as one of the greatest threats or trends or concerns in the workforce here? Um, in alignment with leadership and how we're leading people.
So, look, I think a lot of it has to do with, I mean, kind of thing you're talking around is really understanding what it takes for people to be engaged at work. Okay. Um, and so, the conventional wisdom, and you see all these debates, today, whether it's on social media or even newspaper articles about, hey, we to people to be engaged, we've got to, it's about work life balance, or giving them, let them work from home, or it's about how leaders talk to them, right? Are they talking to them nice, in a nice way? What kind of perks are they giving them, right? I mean, you know even the pay and all these things, right? That's all these things that seem that there's an entire industry, right? You can go get an engagement survey and it'll tell you whether people like your perks and like those things, right? Or like they have enough work life balance. And then leadership teams spend all this time and energy with consultants optimizing their compensation packages. And the problem is that none of that stuff at the end of the day has anything to do with engagement at all, right? What I and here's how I like to define the term engagement, because I can at least measure this to some degree, right? I like to measure or think of engagement as the discretionary effort that a person is willing to give me, right? So are they willing to give me effort above and beyond what they have to do to keep their job, right? And that discretionary effort, the more discretionary effort they're giving me, the more engaged they are. And in order for somebody to give me that discretionary effort, there's two things that have to be true. One, they have to believe in what I'm doing, in the vision, right? They have to believe that the vision of the organization that we're trying to achieve is important. And number two, they have to believe that they can affect the outcome, right? Because if they may think the vision's important, but if they just think that nothing they do actually helps achieve that vision, then they're never going to connect to it. They won't care, right? And so those are the two things that really have to have. And I think there's all these these leaders that are getting lost in all this other stuff, and they're missing that at the end of the day, that's what people care about. And my evidence that this is true is that you will find many places that have great high levels of discretionary effort from their people where they don't have all those good things, right? The US Navy in a submarine is a perfect example. You have horrible work life balance. I mean, you have none, right? You're in horrible conditions. You're out there for 3 months. You can't talk to your family for 3 months. Who wants to, like, if you were to say, but then why are these people doing this? And I'll tell you why they're doing it. It's because there's a mission that they believe in, defending their nation, and they understand that what they're doing, the actions they're taking, are actually making the country safer, and therefore they're willing to do that. Right now, obviously, if you got a bunch of bad conditions and you know bad work environment and all that other stuff, it's going to make it harder. So, but I learned a concept I learned early on in I don't know, one of my business classes about sales or marketing was the difference between an order winner and an order qualifier, right? Meaning that an order winner is the thing that the person actually buys my product or service for. The qualifier is like, I got to meet this minimum level, and if I meet this minimum level, then they'll buy it, right? So I like to think of your perks and your the kind of, whether it's a toxic culture, all that other stuff, that's kind of your order qualifiers. I mean, yeah, you don't want it to be terrible, but at the end of the day, what really is going to make your folks engage is them connecting to the vision and believing that they have the ability to influence the outcome.
Yeah. I completely agree. So if you're out there listening to this podcast, one big takeaway right here is it's not about pay and benefits. You can pay people more than they're worth. You can pay double market value for people, and it's not going to make them stay if other conditions aren't being met. Conversely, you can put people in situations where they don't make a ton of money. In the military, nobody gets rich in the military. Even our generals, four-star generals, they make, like $200,000 a year. They're not getting rich. They're not, get collecting these huge paychecks that like Fortune 500 companies do. These guys make millions. Our generals make like 200,000 bucks, give or take. And so it's not about money. It's not about the perks and the benefits. The military does have great, healthcare and other types of benefits, which is great. But everybody I've talked to in the military, and you can agree or disagree, Chris, it's not about that. It's about being a part of something bigger than myself, feeling like I'm doing something that other people aren't willing or able to do that can actually make a difference. And it's really, truly about not letting my brother and sister who works next to me down because you depend on each other. If one person doesn't show up in the submarine when you were in the Navy, and that seat is empty, and then something happens. You talked about, it can be boring for a while, and all of a sudden there's this, event, and everybody's got to be, in problem solving mode, and it's urgent. And somebody's not in that seat doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like, it can be catastrophic. Just think about that engineer from that story you just told. The captain says, "Hey, if you got 10 seconds and I'm going to flip the switch and we're going to go a different route here, you got 10 seconds." What if that person wasn't in the seat? What if they were sick? What if they didn't put that dedication and effort into it at the level that you described? It would have caused some more issues, because I think when you flip the switch on the sub, it does things with the sub that doesn't make it optimal at that point, right? Like, you're not in optimal running mode, which again puts the crew at risk even further, right?
But yeah, in that case, there would have been lives and catastrophic equipment damage for sure. But yeah, no, 100%. And so that's what, yeah, look, I think that's the biggest risk is it's getting harder and harder to connect people to that, to the mission and the vision of an organization, and to help them understand how they impact that, right? And that's where I think, helping people, the more that you can push decision making down to the lowest levels in the organization, the more you're giving those folks the ability to influence the outcome. right? The more empowered you make them, the more engaged they're going to be. For me, one of the signs that micromanagement's kind of going on or has been going on is when employees would come up to me and say, "Hey, Chris, the widget turner broke. What do you want me to do about it?" Right? And right there, that told me, I'm like, whoa, okay, like that is, so I don't know, I can tell what's been going on here is the bosses have just been telling the people what to do, right? And now you have become conditioned to, when something goes wrong, you're supposed to just come ask me, what should I do about this, right? And what I would really like you to do is make a recommendation to me about what we should do about this, right? And then because the minute, if you say, Chris, the widget turner broke, what do you want me to do? And I tell you, well, you don't own the outcome at all, right? If you go do what I said to do and it doesn't work and something bad happens, what are you going to say? I just did what Chris told me to do, right? So you have you're
No
not invested
accountability.
in it. Yeah, you're not invested in it working at all, right? But the minute I say, well, what do you think we should do? And you give me a solution and I say, that's a good idea. Go do that, right? Well, now you have a vested interest in making it work because you suggested it, right? And so just that small, simple dynamic is switching. I mean, right? I did everything I could to avoid ever telling somebody what I wanted to do. Now, as a leader, you find yourself in situations where things are right. It's chaos. Right. Obviously, there's points where you have to go do this now, and we'll talk about why later. But for the most part, you want to avoid that. What's interesting, and I say that about talk about it later. We actually it's actually a protocol even for that, believe it or not, in the control room of a submarine, right? So if the officer of the deck, he's the officer who's in charge of giving the orders to, drive the ship. And I mean, he's in charge of the entire ship at the moment, right? So if he gave an order to the helmsman or something, said, come right or make your rudder, right, come to course 030. If somebody thought, hey, we shouldn't come to course 030 right now, there was an expectation that they said, stood up forcefully, as we talked about earlier, officer deck, recommend not coming to course 030, right? And if the officer deck didn't have time to deal with it right then, he would say, very well, quartermaster, note that in the log, come to course 030. And by doing that, what he just said was, I heard you. I don't have time to explain it right now, but we're going to log the fact that you objected so that after this, when things calm down, we can talk about it, right? And we can understand why I overrode you, right?
The difference between being heard, valued versus being told. And boy, that's a huge lesson. So I want to kind of peel back the onion on micromanagement a little bit here because it's interesting from my perspective that yeah, people are throwing money at people. People are throwing perks and benefits and ping pong tables and bars and you know, football game, I don't know, whatever. They're throwing the kitchen sink at everybody to try to keep them on the team, but people are still leaving. One of the top reasons that people leave a job is bad or perceived bad leadership, meaning not listening, not valuing them, right? And the other reason is a bad culture. They just have a really bad culture where it's just people are gossiping, people are torpedoing people, whatever that may be. And third is they just don't feel valued. They don't feel appreciated for what they do, the sacrifices they make. And so they, opposite of what you were talking about, they disengage, right? So if we're doing all of these things to quote unquote help people and make things better, why do we have so many issues, right? I think it comes down to the number one reason why people leave leadership, i.e., micromanagement. What is your definition of micromanagement? What are some examples that you're seeing out there that people are dealing with?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's it's kind of a catch-all term just for obviously when the manager or leader is managing and working at levels way below where they should be, right? And doing other people's jobs instead of doing their job. So first, let's talk about like why this happens. because I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings. Again, the conventional wisdom, the meme email is that leaders who are micromanagers do it because they're narcissists, or they're arrogant, or they have some personality defect, right?
Like an insecurity, like, fears, or just things like they need to be in control, or scared something may not go right if they're not involved, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my experience is that although most people think that's why leaders become micromanagers, the reality is that most of the time when leaders are micromanaging, it's because they have to. They had to. They had to at some point, right? There was some issue. The performance of the team, it just wasn't working, and they just got into this mode where they had to start being directive. I kind of equate it to like if your team was a person who's drowning in a lake, right? And when they're drowning in the lake, that is not the time to stand on the pier and like coach them how to swim, right? You just need to jump in the lake and you need to drag them back to the pier. But once you get them back to the pier, you better start teaching them how to swim, because otherwise you're going to turn around and they're going to jump right back in the water and you're going to have to pull them out again. And the problem for most leaders who are in this trap, they've got like 20 swimmers and they keep dragging them back to the pier, and they never have time to train that one up before the next one's jumped in the water, right? And so they just run around dragging people back to the pier all day, right? And so the real root cause is they're doing it because they had to do it, or sometimes they've inherited it, right? Like the plant, my first couple plants had clearly been managed by micromanagers. I mean, I was not even a week into my new role as a plant manager, and I got hourly employees coming up to me. What do you want me to do about this machine that broke? I'm like, dude, I've been here a week. I don't know. Like, what do you
Yeah,
think
you're
we
not an
should do?
expert on the
You
machine. You
know,
didn't build it. Yeah, right.
right. You've been running it for 20 years. What do you think we should do about it? And so that my experience, like I said, is that it's not a person. Most of the time, it's not a personality defect. It's they had to do it, and now they don't know how to get out of it. Right. So what I like to say is it's usually not intention, it's capability and capacity. So my people don't know how to swim, and I don't have the capacity to teach them how to swim. Right. And so what I really need is some help on how can I get them up to learn how to swim, or in this case to get them up to learn how do I make decisions, so that I can then let them make more decisions, right? And a real like tangible example. So I mentioned that first plant. And literally is like the second week, the shift super all the other managers had left for the day. I was hanging out late. Shift supervisor comes up to me and says, Chris, one of the openings on the press broke. What do you want me to do? So what that meant was the press is running at like 2.5% reduced capacity, right? And I said, well, I'd like you to make a recommendation. And he stared at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, so I said, no, well, what do you think we should do? And he's like, I mean, I guess I can take it down and fix it. And I'm like, okay, well, what other options are there? And so, well, we could keep running it like that, I guess. Okay, what other options are there? Well, we could take it down tomorrow and we walked through all these different options. And then we started, I said, okay, so how much if we take it down right now, how much money are we going to lose while it's down to fix it? We talked about that. How much money are we losing every hour when it runs at 2.5% reduced capacity? We figured out that. Right. And so we figured out these kinds of things. And at the end of it, we had these four options. We knew we had calculated how much money we lost after each option. And I looked at him, I said, which one do you think we should do? And he still was uncomfortable telling me, but one, we did the math that one was the best option. And finally he's like, well, I think we should do that one. And I'm like, very well, go do it. But the problem was, now, like, that was a great conversation. It was huge for him. It was huge for me. But that took like an hour. And I have 500 employees in that plant. That's not possible. I can't do that 500 times. Right. And that wasn't going to work. And so that was when I started saying, wow, I need to bring in, let's start with at least the shift supervisors. And that conversation that he and I just had, I need to teach them all how to do that on their own. Because what I want them to do, instead of coming to me and saying, Chris, what do you want me to do? I want them to say, Chris, here's my problem. we've looked at three or four potential solutions. The math says this one's the best. I recommend we go do that, right? So that I can just say that sounds good, or I can, hey, maybe there's a fifth option you didn't think about, or talk to me about how you calculate, did the math on that one. But I'm in a much different space where my coaching only takes like 5 or 10 minutes instead of an hour.
Yep. Teaching other people how to fish, man, that's incredible. So with micromanagement, what are some ways you go out there, you wrote this book, you're the expert on this stuff. What are some ways if I'm a CEO in a company and I'm busy and I've got some folks that are, maybe in a similar situation, just don't have enough time to pull people out of the water that are drowning, kind of like the example you just gave. And I want to make sure my leaders get out of micromanagement, get out of this way that's not sustainable. Um, and we create a different kind of culture there. What are the ways that you recommend, based on your book and your experience here? What are the ways to end that micromanagement? What are the first steps you need to take to start that process?
Sure. So the first step is to recognize this capacity capability issue and to fix it before you start to try to change the culture. That is the biggest issue that I see. The thing where I mean, look, I can even tell you early in my career, people, oh, we're gonna try and empower people, and my head would roll up, like, oh my gosh, well, this is gonna not end well, because everybody gets it. If we're not changing the capability of the people and we're just asking them to behave different, it's going to end bad, right? I mean, if I come in and start having town halls and say, I want you all to start making more decisions. I want you to be accountable for more decisions. I want you to take ownership of stuff. And so I'm not going to just give you the answers anymore, right? I mean, that's not, if you haven't done anything to prepare them for that, it's not going to go well.
They're not capable. They're not informed. They don't know, they don't have tools. They don't have resources. They're going to make bad decisions just to not bug you.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's where, I say, look, you've got to start with you got to recognize that this is the issue, and you've got to give them the training so that you can deal with it, and start giving them safe places to start making decisions, right? But that they can start to get confident in their own decision making ability. Now, once you've started to address that, like, then you can start to focus on what is the cultural shift that needs to occur. Then you can get really tangible about the behaviors, right? So um and I'll I typically work with a client to say, let's define what do we want our guiding principles to be, right? So maybe a guiding principles of ours is, hey, we believe in continuous learning. We believe that you shouldn't do anything you don't know why you're doing it, right? If you don't know why you're doing it, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do anything because we told you to. But again, you got to fix the capability before you go say that. But once you've said that, now you can say, right, so from now on, if I hear you say I'm just doing this because so and so told me, we're going to stop and have a conversation about that, because that's not an okay answer, right? Or I want you to stop asking me what to do about things, right, and start making recommendations. um, so then you can start defining what those are, and then you can start really having, at the end of the day, when it comes to changing culture, I like to give the analogy of it's like the pig going to breakfast, not the chicken. Okay. So what, I don't know if you've heard that before. What I mean by that is, the chicken made a donation at breakfast, right? But the pig is all in. The pig's not coming back from breakfast. Okay. So what does that mean? So when I talk about culture transformations, right? You typically mean, hey, we're going to define what we want our culture to be. We're going to have some meetings. We're going to teach people what we want it to be. We're going to probably invest in some, signs and stuff and whatever. And the leaders who fund that and participate in those, congratulations, you're a chicken, right? You've made a donation. If you're going to be the leader that's the pig, it means you have to fundamentally change your own behaviors too. If you previously allowed people to just ask you what to do and you told them, you are part of the problem, right? You've got to stop that. And look, I've had many plant managers report to me, in my subsequent roles, and I would go visit a plant and be sitting in their office, and I would see a stream of people all day long coming to their office, right? I mean, it was insane. I couldn't believe. I'm like, how do you get any work done? Because they're all day long coming to the office. Hey, this thing happened. What do you want me to do? Hey, this thing didn't come in. What do you want me to do? And the plant managers answer it. And I looked at them. I mean, I look at them by the end of the day and be like, do you see what you're doing? And like you've made them all dependent on you. Like this plant can't run without you now because no, they won't think on their own, right? You have to stop this. And the odd thing was, if you ask the employees, they all loved them, right? Because he took every one of their problems on himself and bore the weight of it, right?
Yeah, they got listened to, they got attention from the boss, they get FaceTime, they get, whatever out of that. Yeah, it's incredible, Chris. I think what are some of the other signs, right? So if I'm in a company, I'm a leader, and I might, be connecting with this conversation, what are a couple signs that you might be a micromanager?
Yeah, so two of them I've said a couple times, but I'll say them again because again, I have almost an allergic reaction to these phrases, right? I mean, that's how to when I hear them, I'm like, okay, and that is, what do you want me to do? And I'm just doing what I was told. Those two things, right? You need to develop an allergic reaction to those, right? That when you hear them, you stop and go, no, that is not how we do things around here, right? Like we're not doing it that way. But look, other things. Look, if you lots of bottlenecks on decisions,
So slow decision making.
right? It's taking a really long time to make decisions. A great example of that, especially around like capital projects. I've gone into organizations where like people, the same engineer's been working trying to justify a capital project for like 9 months. And you're like, what are you doing? And usually it's because there's only one person who's making the decision and just an absolute bottleneck, and they can't get what they need through it, right? So those kinds of delays, lots of changing direction constantly. Is another sign because people are waiting for you to tell them what to do. If you go to our website www.enablingempowerment.com, on the homepage, there's actually a 25 questions you can ask yourself, right? Do I hear these things or see these things at work? If I do, then I probably got a micromanagement problem.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for putting that out there, and thanks for offering that to people. Because sometimes you get busy, get caught up in the day to day, life, family, and work, and kids, and this and that. Life gets busy. The days go by fast, and you listen to a podcast, read a book, kind of deal with different situations during the day, and you're like, I'm kinda tired, man. That kinda sounds like me sometimes. Maybe I need to take a look at that. And so, Chris, thank you for all of your great work. Obviously, service to your country, but all your great work in this field of micromanagement and leadership, and really empowerment. Changing that dynamic where you can have really good, honest decision or conversations with people to help them understand things differently, so they do understand where they're at, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what their part in the bigger picture really is, and how important they feel about needing to show up and contribute, and what happens if they don't. I think that's powerful. So, Chris, thank you for all of that. Thank you for your time being on the show today. If people want to connect with you, want to learn more, get a copy of the book, have you come in, train them, teach them, coach them, engage you in some form or fashion, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Sure. Look, I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to the website www.enablingempowerment.com. My website, my email address will be there. Chris Seifert at chris.seifert@enablingempowerment.com. The book is available on Amazon, Kindle paperback. Audible should be out later, I think in December timeframe. I titled it "Enabling Empowerment: A Leadership Playbook for Ending Micromanagement, Empowering Decision Makers." The playbook was important to me. I wanted to give like people actual content. So there's a lot of templates. For instance, a financial model that I use to analyze decisions, right? And all those kind of templates that are referenced in the book are available on the website. You can go download them and use them for your own your own purposes, whatever you need to. So there's a ton of content up there as well.
That's excellent, and it's ton of value. We're going to also put all of that information in the show notes of all of the channels for which we broadcast this podcast, so people have an easy button. They can just go right into the notes and click a link and get right to you, talk to you, ask you questions, etc. So great, powerful lessons from Chris, a leadership micromanagement expert that can really help turn your organization around, help you be a better leader, help you empower other people, not only just make your own job easier, but make the organization better for the long run anyway, right? Because if you're in a position of leadership, it's not about you, it's about the long-term best interest of the organization itself and the people that will follow on in your footsteps after you're long gone. And so you want to leave them in really good, in the best possible way. And Chris's book, Chris's principles really help you dial in on that and achieve those types of things. So next week we got a great show in store for you as well. Next week we're talking about why celebrating success is so important and how it can be a game changer in your business or life. You don't want to miss that. That's it for today. Everybody has a great week.